If you think your silence is what hurts her the most, you may be misunderstanding the real power you hold. There is something far more unsettling than disappearing, and if you stay with me, you'll understand why this shift changes everything, not just for her, but for you. If this speaks to you at any point, quietly, like the video, and subscribe. Not for me, but for the version of you that's ready to grow beyond reaction. Most men are taught that no contact is the ultimate move. You pull back, you vanish. You stop texting, stop calling, stop watching her stories. And yes, silence creates space. Space creates curiosity. Curiosity can create longing, but silence by itself is still a reaction. It is often fueled by pain, by hope, by the unspoken desire that she will notice your absence and feel something sharp enough to come running back. And here is the uncomfortable truth. When your silence is emotionally charged, when it's waiting to be noticed, it still ties you to her. Even if she doesn't respond, you are internally watching, measuring, wondering. Your nervous system is still connected to the outcome. Stoicism was never about silence as a strategy. Stoicism is about emotional sovereignty. There is a difference between I am not speaking to you and I no longer need to move in response to you. One is tactical, the other is transformational. When a man goes silent but remains emotionally reactive, a woman often senses it. Not because she's calculating, but because humans are wired to detect emotional shifts. If your silence feels heavy, resentful, or performative, it carries tension, and tension invites power struggle. But when a man becomes emotionally neutral, not cold, not cruel, not indifferent in a dramatic way, but grounded, centered, self-directed, something far deeper happens. You are no longer withdrawing to provoke. You are recalibrating because you genuinely value your peace. That is what unsettles someone, because when your identity is no longer orbiting the relationship, she can no longer predict you. She can no longer feel your emotional pull trying to reach her. And uncertainty, when it is calm and dignified, is far more powerful than silence fueled by pain. Many men think strength is in withholding communication. True strength is in withholding emotional dependence. When you stop monitoring her behavior, when you stop crafting your actions to influence her reaction, when your life begins to expand beyond the storyline of us, you are no longer playing the game. You are walking away from the board. And that shift, subtle but profound, creates a psychological impact far deeper than ignored messages ever could. Because silence can be broken, but emotional detachment born from self-respect that rewrites the dynamic entirely. Most men misunderstand what actually creates emotional impact. They believe pain creates it. They believe distance creates it. They believe mystery creates it. But what truly creates emotional weight is emotional self-containment. When you practice no contact as a rule, you are still orienting your behavior around her. You are thinking about the timeline, counting the days, wondering when she'll reach out, checking your phone more often than usual, telling yourself not to look at her social media while internally fighting the urge. That internal struggle is not stoicism. It is suppressed attachment. Real stoicism is quieter than that. It is less dramatic. It doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like returning home to yourself. When a man stops reacting internally, not just externally, something shifts in the emotional field between two people. There is no more invisible tug, no more energetic checking, no more subtle attempt to win. And here is what many women experience in that moment. Though they may never articulate it clearly, they feel the absence of emotional access. Not the absence of conversation, the absence of access. When you were emotionally invested, even in silence, she could still feel you oriented toward her. That orientation creates comfort. Even if she pulls away, she subconsciously knows your emotional door is open. But when you close that door peacefully, without slamming it, without announcing it, without trying to prove anything, she feels something different. She feels that you are no longer waiting, and that realization often lands heavier than silence ever could. Because silence can mean I'm hurt. Emotional self-containment means I have moved forward. That distinction changes the emotional equation entirely. You see, human beings are deeply attuned to relevance. When someone we once had emotional influence over begins to operate independently without resentment, without hostility, without attempts to reconnect, it creates cognitive dissonance. What changed? Why does he seem steady? Why doesn't he feel reachable anymore? This isn't about manipulation, it's about emotional maturity. When you become emotionally anchored within yourself, you stop chasing reassurance. You stop interpreting her behavior as a reflection of your worth. You stop needing clarity from someone who is uncertain, and uncertainty no longer disturbs your peace. That calm, grounded stability is unfamiliar to many people, men and women alike, because so many relationships operate on emotional reactivity, text response, withdrawal, jealousy, pursuit, silence, reconnection, a loop. When you step out of that loop entirely, it disrupts the rhythm she was used to, and disruption without drama is deeply unsettling, not because it hurts her ego, but it signals growth. And growth, especially when it's quiet and undeniable, forces people to confront what they may have taken for granted. The man who needed validation is predictable. The man who no longer seeks it is powerful, not loud, not aggressive, just internally free. And freedom is something silence alone can never communicate. There is something even deeper happening beneath all of this. When you move from silence to true emotional independence, you stop trying to be understood by someone who is no longer aligned with you. That is a profound shift. Many men don't realize how much energy they spend trying to be seen correctly. You replay conversations in your mind. You wish she understood your intentions. You hope she recognizes your effort. Even during no contact, part of you quietly wants her to get it, to see what she lost, to realize your value. But the moment you release the need to be understood by her, you reclaim an enormous amount of psychological power. Because now your actions are not driven by the desire for recognition, they are driven by alignment. And alignment is calm. You begin making decisions that support your long-term peace rather than your short-term emotional relief. You stop crafting subtle social media posts designed to send a message. You stop imagining what she might think if she saw you thriving. You stop performing growth. You simply grow. This is where Stoicism becomes transformative rather than strategic. A Stoic man is not emotionally numb. He is emotionally disciplined. He feels disappointment, attachment, nostalgia, but he does not allow those feelings to dictate his direction. And here is what makes this so impactful. When she senses that you are no longer trying to prove yourself, no longer trying to be validated, no longer trying to be chosen, she feels the shift in hierarchy. Not a hierarchy of dominance, a hierarchy of self-respect. You are no longer placing her perception above your own self-concept. That can be deeply disorienting for someone who once held emotional influence over you, because attention is a form of energy. And when you withdraw attention without resentment, you are not punishing, you are reallocating. You are investing in your health, your purpose, your friendships, your discipline, your routines, your future. And something subtle happens inside you during this process. You stop idealizing her. Not because she was terrible, not because you suddenly see her as flawed, but because you begin seeing yourself more clearly. When your life expands, your perspective expands. The emotional intensity that once felt overwhelming starts to feel like a chapter rather than the entire story. And that shift does something powerful. It makes you emotionally non-reactive. If she reaches out, you respond calmly. If she doesn't, you remain steady. If she moves on, you do not spiral. If she hesitates, you do not chase. You are not detached from humanity. You are detached from dependency. And dependency is fuels most relationship anxiety. The quiet truth is this. What often hurts more than silence is witnessing someone you once influenced become unaffected. Not cold, not bitter, unaffected. Bitter, because when you are unaffected, you are no longer negotiating for love. You are only accepting what aligns with your standards. And standards built from self-respect are far more powerful than any tactic designed to trigger a reaction. This is the difference between playing a role and becoming a man who does not need to play one. There is a moment that happens quietly inside a man when he truly understands this. It's the moment he stops asking, "How do I make her feel something?" and starts asking, "Why was I willing to feel so little for myself?" That question changes everything. Because when you obsess over strategies, no contact, delayed replies, controlled indifference, you are still centering her emotions as the reference point. You are still measuring your worth against her reactions. But Stoicism asks a different question. It asks, what is within my control? Her feelings are not. Her timing is not. Her clarity is not. Your character is. Your standards are. Your response is. And when you deeply internalize that, your behavior shifts in ways that are subtle but undeniable. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop defending your value. You stop negotiating for consistency. Instead, you observe. You watch how someone treats you without trying to manage the outcome. You listen to their patterns instead of their promises. You pay attention to how you feel around them, calm or anxious, respected or uncertain. This awareness is not coldness. It is emotional maturity. When you no longer attempt to control the narrative, You become deeply grounded, and grounded men are rare. Not because men are incapable of emotional intelligence, but because many were never taught that strength can be quiet. They were taught to pursue, to fix, to prove, to endure. Very few were taught to step back and evaluate whether the connection is truly reciprocal. When you do that, when you calmly decide that your time, energy, and attention are sacred, you communicate something without saying a word. You communicate that access to you is earned through consistency, not chemistry alone. And that realization can land heavily because chemistry is easy. Consistency requires character. If she senses that you are no longer impressed by temporary affection, no longer swayed by intermittent attention, no longer activated by mixed signals, she understands that you are operating from a higher internal standard. And standards do not beg. They attract alignment or they walk away peacefully. That peaceful detachment is what unsettles more than silence ever could. Silence can feel like a tactic. Standards feel like permanence. When a woman realizes that you are not waiting for her to change, that you are simply continuing forward, she is forced to confront her own clarity, not because you demanded it, but because your stability highlights it. And here is the part most men don't expect. This shift isn't primarily about her reaction, it's about your nervous system. When you stop chasing emotional closure, your body relaxes, your sleep improves, your thoughts slow down, your focus returns. You reclaim mental space that was once consumed by what if. That internal calm is the real reward. And ironically, that calm is what creates the deepest psychological impact externally. Because calm men cannot be emotionally leveraged, they cannot be baited, they cannot be destabilized by inconsistency. And when someone realizes they no longer have the power to disrupt you, they feel it deeply. And here's the truth most men only understand much later. The goal was never to make her miss you. The goal was to become the man who no longer abandons himself. When you first consider no contact, it often comes from a place of survival. You need space because the connection feels overwhelming. You need silence because interaction feels painful. That is human. That is understandable. But growth begins when silence stops being a shield and starts becoming clarity. Clarity about what you tolerate, clarity about what you deserve, clarity about the kind of partnership you are actually built for. When you internalize Stoicism, not as emotional suppression, but as emotional responsibility, you stop outsourcing your peace. You no longer wait for someone to choose you in order to feel valuable. You no longer interpret distance as a verdict on your worth. You no longer scramble to restore connection at the cost of your dignity, and something powerful happens in that space. You begin to choose yourself in small, consistent ways. You go to the gym even when motivation dips. You focus on your work even when nostalgia creeps in. You reconnect with friends instead of isolating. You pursue interests that have nothing to do with impressing anyone. This is not about becoming unbothered. It's about becoming internally anchored. And when a man becomes anchored, he becomes difficult to shake. Not because he is rigid, but because he is rooted. If she reappears, you calmly rather than react emotionally. If she apologizes, you listen, but you evaluate patterns, not just words. If she remains distant, you do not shrink yourself to maintain proximity. You understand that love is not proven through longing. It is proven through consistency, and consistency cannot be forced. When you reach this stage, something subtle but profound shifts in your presence. You walk differently. You speak more deliberately. You laugh without checking who is watching. You no longer scan rooms for validation. You are not trying to be mysterious. You are simply self-contained. And self-contained men create a different kind of attraction. Not the anxious, dramatic pull of uncertainty, but the steady draw of stability. But here is the deeper revelation. Even if she never comes back, even if she never realizes your value, even if the story ends quietly, you win because you did not allow heartbreak to turn you bitter. You allowed it to turn you disciplined. You did not let rejection collapse your identity. You used it to refine it. That is the Stoic path. Not revenge, not emotional shutdown, refinement. And when a man refines himself instead of reacting to loss,